Hello, I'm Chuck Smith.
And I'm Carol Matriciana. Welcome to this edition of the Pagan Invasion.
For over a century, an ever-increasing spiritual awakening has attracted millions of Westerners to an Eastern philosophical and religious worldview. One vehicle used to spread the message to America and Europe has been an endless procession of India's elite priesthood, who are said to have experienced the secret knowledge of the universe and become transcended. They are known as the masters, swamis, gurus, and yogis. Hinduism, which is the religion of India, is based on the evolutionary premise that the universe has existed from the beginning in the form of forces, and that over time those forces have personified themselves as gods and goddesses. Hinduism then regards the elite priests, known as the Brahmins, as a part of God. And within this framework, the priest is seen as the equivalent of God, or in some instances, even greater than God. Originally, it was believed that the Hindu could only attain spiritual transcendence in his old age. But in 1861, through the supposed revelations of a dead incarnation of Guru Babaji, the idea that anyone in any stage of life could receive this secret knowledge was a welcome shortcut, a revelation indeed that was to be popularly received in the West through the teachings of subsequent gurus and God-men.
The first such master, Swami Vivekananda, entered the United States in 1892 and officially introduced yoga and Hindu philosophy at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. His attempt to present Hinduism as science shocked his American audiences, many of whom considered Hindu occultism an abomination. But despite the seeming setback, Vivekananda's persuasive disciples ran with the analogy and have successfully propagated the message of paganism as science to the nations ever since. One of the most acclaimed of India's godmen, due to his association with the Beatles during the 60s, is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. The Beatles encouraged millions of their fans worldwide to meditate their way to salvation through transcendental meditation, a user-friendly technique of Hindu mysticism artfully designed for the Westerner. However, after a few months, the Beatles became disillusioned with their personal yogi and publicly admitted that they had been spiritually duped.
We made a mistake.
I think other people are making a mistake and go see you now.
That's up to them.
And we thought...
What? We're human, you know.
What do you mean by a mistake? You spent a lot of...
That's all, you know.
We thought there was more to him than there was, you know. But he's human. And for a while we thought he wasn't, you know. Thought he was...
Nevertheless, the millions already attracted by the Eastern message had swallowed the tantalizing alternative to Judeo-Christianity and had begun their pilgrimage to Eastern persuasion. The use of drugs was another contributing factor to the popularization of the guru, who interpreted the experience of drugs and the experience of Eastern spiritual awakening as one and the same.
Today, despite frequent media warnings of the fraudulent ways of the many godmen, the fanaticism to follow this now sanitized occultism prevails. The seducing godmen's promise of relief from stress and worry, with the attainment of health, wealth, and spiritual liberty now and in the afterlife, does seem almost too good to be true. Our report begins in Delhi, India, where we talked with a number of these godmen and their followers.
Here in Delhi, India, Guru Darshan Singh, only one of hundreds of gurus, has personally converted or initiated some 15,000 followers. He explains that it is the job of the guru to groom his disciples into the shortest path to salvation.
Salvation is the same, but we have various paths leading to it. Some of the paths are long paths, other paths are the short paths.
Why is a master then necessary?
Master is necessary, to groom you into the shortest path.
Descended from a long line of Hindu spiritual masters, Rabindranath Maharaj is a former guru and accomplished yogi who is worshipped by thousands.
The Hindu needed to be near his guru. The Hindu needed to consult his guru. He eventually saw his guru as the only means to salvation.
It is absolutely extraordinary also to look at disciples of some of these gurus that I saw in India, for example. These adoring, huge, open eyes that just will accept anything from him and that just love him beyond anything.
I loved Maharishi. I worshipped him. Therefore, everything he said or did or thought was perfectly right in my eyes.
I just met Bhagwan and there it was. It's nobody else than him.
Bhagwan is my master and I love him.
I'm in love with him. That's the only thing I can say.
It is a love relationship. Master and disciple. Something happens in your heart when you see a master.
Bhagwan's my master.
Here at the Kumbh Mela Festival or Aquarian Fair in Allahabad, India, 20 million Hindus gather to witness an endless procession of hundreds of these self-proclaimed godmen. Even the dirt beneath these gurus' feet is an aid to the disciple in his quest for salvation. This footage was covertly photographed and smuggled out of India. Naked priests are considered to be the holiest and most dedicated of guru disciples. Many cover their bodies with cremation ashes and dirt and mat cow dung into their hair. Some are armed and are dependent upon extremely potent drug concoctions. They have surrendered everything, families, possessions, and even their minds, becoming literally insane out of devotion to their guru.
Well, guru is our best friend, philosopher, and guide, and he shows the way to God. So, we in our India acknowledge him as a divine power, just equivalent to God.
If anyone could be near the beloved Master and witness the love, the compassion, the humility, the grace, the generosity, no one in his right mind would not know that this is a walking, talking, living God on earth.
In all scriptures you will find that the Master is the God-incarnated power working on earth.
You people that interviewed this gentleman today, I don't think you knew who you interviewed, but you interviewed God.
For the Hindu, the guru is all important. The guru is his Lord, his master, his savior, even greater than God.
Yes, guru is greater than God.
Carol Matriciana is a journalist and author of the book Gods of the New Age. Born and raised in India, she moved to London in 1973, where she became one of England's leading authorities on new religious movements.
I have personally talked with many, many gurus, and the sad fact is that within their belief system, they have to be detached and removed from their emotions and compassion, and their cruelty and inhumaneness is seen as spiritual and excused as holy.
I was really interested in their worship and their veneration and their adoration and the gifts and offerings they brought to me. But I was certainly not interested in their problems and their difficulties and hardships and pains.
The guru followers believe that he returns this incredible love that they feel towards him, but in reality, he feeds off their emotions to maintain his own ego.
So many people come here because they too are in love with Bhagwan. They too are seeking the wisdom, the love, that Bhagwan has to offer.
He has so much love, and he gives his love to everybody, and it helps us to find our love in ourselves.
The followers of Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple, were convinced that their relationship was built on love. And nearly 1,000 of his devoted disciples committed suicide at his command. It was their final gift of total surrender to the leader they loved. Their lives cut short by a madman claiming to be God, the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Guru Sai Baba is one of India's most powerful men, with millions of Indian disciples and a growing Western following. He says of himself, "I am God. My power is divine and has no limit. There is no force, natural or supernatural, that can stop me or my mission."
Tal Brooks spent 20 years exploring the occult. His quest ultimately took him to India, where for 2 years he was the top Western disciple of miracle-working super guru Sai Baba. Tal is now an author and president of the Spiritual Counterfeits Project based in Berkeley. I recently asked Tal to share his thoughts concerning his encounters with Sai Baba.
Sai Baba claims to be God on earth. I mean, his full claim is that he's a Messiah. The word that he uses is avatar, which would be on the level, as far as he's concerned, of Jesus Christ or Ram or Krishna. So he claims to be a full incarnation of God. Sai Baba, according to the whole concept of avatars, claims that he was perfectly in the ocean of Brahman, of light, that the Eastern view of who God is, the static eternal, and that he willed himself back into birth.
What were some of the things about Sai Baba that attracted you to him?
I believe that Sai Baba was God. When I was in the core of his, inner circle group, I mean, I was his top Western disciple for a while, a period. I believed that he was the embodiment of God on earth. And the sheer charisma and presence and power of Sai Baba was of an order of magnitude, and I've seen a lot of people. My father was a diplomat, lived in Europe, saw a lot of slices of life, but here was an order of magnitude beyond any normal human ego structure I'd ever seen. I wanted him to be God. I'd had this massive mystical experience in the States, this huge LSD thing, 3,000 micrograms, in which I seemed to merge with the universe and merge with the mind of God, and then read all the Eastern revelations, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the works of the gurus. So you must know that I was primed. So when I saw Baba, and he came out of that limousine in this brilliant red robe, I was just awestruck. And the truth is, there is a very tangible presence, a power that he has. It's the entire God consciousness of the cosmos fueled down into this one body.
Now, you mentioned that Sai Baba performed many convincing miracles.
Regarding his miracles, when I first saw him, I told you that I was in a state of incredible readiness. And in a sense, I'd had this huge experience that now needed to be validated. And I read all the Eastern scriptures from the Upanishads out. And now it was time to see it happen. Was this man who claimed to be a God on earth, how would he validate it? Suddenly you had someone who did miracles. Newsweek magazine, a month before I met him, had a one-page on Sai Baba as being India's Christ. Rather than turning water into wine, he turned into gasoline. His car ran out on the desert. He touched it as it was taken out of a well and poured in the tank, and he drove off. Many miracles were documented. So when I saw him, not only did he have this thoughtless, all-knowing perception of people's thoughts, not only did he tell me about particularities of my childhood and past that were privy information that he couldn't have known, humanly speaking, but over the 2 years that I was with him, I saw him heal people. This dermatologist from Stanford University, Tatacharya, the atheist, heard about Baba, was going to test him as a case in point. He flies to India. Baba already knows his name. Ah, Dr. Tatacharya, you've just come to get yourself healed. turn around. And Bob, at this point, materializes his ash, his famous holy ash, out of nowhere, sleeve rolled up. I've seen that happen hundreds of times. And then rubs Dr. Tadachari's back and says, "Acha, you're done, go home." Okay, this guy's at Stanford University, he's a dermatologist, and he's been given batteries of medical tests, and the whole prognosis is that terminal cancer, but the kind that metastasizes so the cells are all over the body. He gets back, and there is not a trace. I'm sorry, but some of your high-order stage magicians would have a problem doing that. There was a group of Italian scientists there 8 years after I left him. It was in one of the Italian newspapers with journalists. It was a clear day, and they said, for instance, "Can you do something meteorological with the weather?" And Bob said, looked up, and there was a rainbow across the sky. And all this kind of thing. He would pick off a tree cherries that can only be found 700 miles away in Kashmir, mangoes, different fruit from the same tree. You know, one time I'm with him, he materializes a handful of laddu, Indian candy, this big, bam, baseball-sized chunk of laddu appears, and I eat it, okay? This is really amazing. So, again, the miracles he claims to be his calling card, but to someone who is a devotee of that belief in God, it shows that the mind is indeed one with the cosmos. The consciousness is in every atom, every molecule, exactly what New Agers are believing now, exactly what Shirley MacLaine is saying in Out of Limb, exactly what Jose Arguelles was trying to do in the harmonic convergence, and that is to control reality by thought. And so Baba's miracles are attempts. I mean, they're more than attempts to people. They're the outward evidence that he is one with the universe and that he's controlling all of reality, and therefore he's God.
During the filming of Gods of the New Age, we had no problem getting gurus and their disciples in India to admit that they believed that they were actually God. However, we found that in America and in Europe, there was a certain reluctance on the part of guru followers and New Agers to admit on camera that they were God. Then something happened. ABC TV broadcast a mini-series called Out on a Limb, which depicted Shirley MacLaine with her arms outstretched toward the ocean, defiantly claiming to be God. As a result of the telecast, many in the West have now found the courage to admit that they actually believe they are God. The idea of people wanting to be God is nothing new. It's been around since the beginning of recorded history. In fact, the promise of godhood is the same lie the devil used to entice Eve into disobeying her creator. Gurus use this same lie today, calling themselves God and promising godhood to those that follow them.
Prabhu Guptara, born and raised in India, is currently a journalist and media commentator in London.
Gurus are going to the West because of two reasons. First, of course, they want to convert people. They want them to become followers of their own religion, in some cases themselves. And secondly, because they feel they have something to offer. What these gurus have to offer is a family, a community to belong to, which they don't have.
Dr. Os Guinness, an Oxford scholar and noted world lecturer, is author of the bestseller, Dust of Death.
One of the deepest longings in the modern world is for a sense of meaning and belonging, sense in their lives and sort of stability in their worlds. And people, having not found that in the West, are hungry for it. And reacting against the West, they're backing into the arms of the East without looking at it straight.
Ed Senesi is a former member of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, known as the Hare Krishna movement. For 3 years, he was editor-in-chief of their magazine, Back to Godhead.
The attitude toward the family in the Hare Krishna movement is very unfortunate. The family is seen, more or less, as a necessary evil.
Eckhart Floater, a successful German journalist, became a devoted disciple of Rajneesh in 1979 and spent several months with him in India.
Rajneesh clearly says that the family, that marriage, that all these traditional family bonds are rotten. The only relationship that counts is between his disciples and him.
Kathy, devoted disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for 15 years, was a teacher and governor of transcendental meditation, known as TM.
I thought Tim was strengthening my family, but it was really weakening it because I was turning all my attention in on myself.
If you have an allegiance to your wife or your children, to the extent that you have that dedication to those people, you are less dedicated to the organization.
I either had to become a member so I could go with him, or he was going to divorce me because he was not supposed to have any outside attachments. He said it wasn't that he didn't love me anymore, and in fact he still loved me very much. It's just that I was only human and Bhagwan was superhuman, and therefore he was more deserving of my husband's love than I was.
How many of these people loved their neighbor, their family, in this totally giving way?
Alexandra Schmidt is one of France's leading experts on new religious movements.
How many have been so blind to all the negative aspects of a person they loved as to that of the guru?
Ellen is a spokeswoman for the Brahma Kumaris Raja Yoga organization, which is completely administered by women who control 800 centers in 40 countries.
Our organization has the practice amongst all the participants of celibacy, whether in individuals or married couples.
I found myself being attracted to my wife, but I couldn't, because as soon as I felt attracted to her emotionally, physically, then it was difficult for me to maintain my celibacy. So the way I resolved that was to turn her into an object of dislike or hate.
We have living proof of thousands of couples who are living in this way and are finding much greater harmony and pure love as opposed to limited physical love.
Over 90% of the marriages in the Krishna movement end in divorce.
Rather than using our energy in raising a family and being involved in many physical relationships, we're focusing that energy on spirituality.
You see, what's so diabolical about all this is that it masquerades as spirituality.
In some schools of thought, to be spiritual, celibacy is encouraged, and yet in others, sexual perversion is practiced, not only among the gurus themselves, but by their disciples, including young children. Contradictions are also seen in the attitude towards women, who, on the spiritual level, are the focus of worship. Their femaleness is seen as the creative power of God. For instance, to be initiated by a female yogini is considered much holier than initiation by a male. And yet, on a day-to-day level, women are considered lower than men and treated as less than human. In the religious communities in India, which are known as ashrams, there is absolutely no place for children. And here in the West, the gurus generally don't want the burden and responsibility of children because it distracts the parents from devotion to him and his cause.
They have a school system whereby they force the children at age 5 to live in the ashram.
A lot of the kids did think it was like a prison. They didn't get to go anywhere but the ranch. And while we were at school, it's really just a place for the kids to go to get out of the grown-ups' way.
And they separate them from the mother and father, which is very unfortunate and very destructive.
Well, the kids would want to see their mom and dad, you know, just to be with them as a family. The kids wouldn't even know where their parents were, and they'd have to go look for them. And when they did, parents were usually too busy to talk to them. And so the kids were mainly by themselves and unsupervised.
The most heartbreaking result of the guru invasion to the West is the damage and harm it brings to the children, those who have no other choice than to live in the ashram because their parents have chosen to follow the guru. Separated from parents and cut off from outside relatives, they become community property. They lose their individuality and identity and are alienated from society.
Pastor Friedrich Hack has written over 30 books on various cults and is Germany's leading expert on new religious movements.
Children brought up in a cult are only educated to follow the commands of their leaders. They never experienced freedom. They never experienced a responsible life where they could have their own choice, where they could follow their will.
I've had these children taken them to parks, and they've seen normal people, and they'd recoil in fear from them because they don't look like devotees. The men don't have shaven heads or robes.
I didn't want to leave the ranch. I'd rather stay there because I was scared of the people outside of it. Because, I don't know, you just got a feeling down there, so you were worked into staying there.
Now, why would an organization want to disrupt families like that? My own understanding in the cult dynamic is that it's a principle of control, divide and conquer.
St. Augustine, in defining man, said that there was a God-shaped vacuum in man. Were you aware of such a vacuum in your life?
Oh, deeply, from the earliest moments I could think. Unless we're absolutely shallow people, there is something in us that wants to know why in the world are we here, what is ultimate truth. We want to settle this issue. And I think Augustine's statement is key. We do have a God-shaped vacuum. And we learn later that we are made by God in the image of God, and we have a deeply spiritual impulse to know and to connect.
What is it that we're searching for in the West that we haven't found?
Well, I think of myself as a child and as a university student. When I went from psychic stuff to LSD, there was a vacuum there. Frankly, most Christian churches, most of them seemed empty and irrelevant. They seemed vacuous, and many of the pastors didn't even believe in what they claimed to believe. So I think there's been, even the Bible talks about a great falling away, and a falling away of belief and a falling away of purpose. And I think people pick up on that. I think that's why Shirley MacLaine has gone out on a limb. She's gone into the New Age. I think the reason they suddenly see this enthralling, colorful, exciting alternative where they can have their cake and eat it too. They can be God, and they can do what they want to. There's no such thing as sin. And in the Eastern system, you can be God, you're an immortal soul, you can reincarnate, you are part of the universe, you own the universe.
Let me follow up on something you said. You said that you were seduced. Seduced is a negative word, and yet you've spoken about Sai Baba with such positive affection. What is happening here?
I'm speaking about him to tell you how powerful he is, and some of these other gurus. I believe completely that there is something very diabolical happening. But again, I think people having a spiritual need, the Bible warns about counterfeits, and he is one of many. He is a seducer. Later, in retrospect, after having been under some of these people, I see that he is an antichrist. Sai Baba is an antichrist. Anti meaning either against or in place of. And Matthew 24:24, the verse that brought me to Jesus Christ, and there shall come false prophets and antichrists, working great signs and wonders, working miracles in their antichrist, to deceive, if possible, the very elect of God. So the Bible clearly has a category for people like Sai Baba and the New Age masters. So then you say, what is an antichrist and what category is that? And I would tell you that it is someone who is fully possessed, not by a human spirit, but biblically by a demon, a demonic entity of the kind that, our modern minds search for paradigms, and you think of the movie The Exorcist and this ancient spirit from Iraq inhabiting the body of the little girl Reagan. Well, Baba's thing is far bigger than that, but an ancient principality that's been kicking around the cosmos for a long time, that is in this body that hates Jesus Christ, that hates God. It knows God. And therefore antichrist, instead of doing miracles, claiming to be God, like the devil in the wilderness with Christ saying, worship me, usurping God. And so these gurus are very useful because they manipulate the God-shaped vacuum in us and they draw it to themselves, and they are seducers. They're the ultimate spiritual Pied Pipers. I came back from India having seen the miracles of Sai Baba, and I learned now that they were satanic miracles. They were done by demonic empowerment. And I don't believe God is dead on the throne and that there are no miracles. I believe there are legitimate works of God now. He hasn't dried up on the throne and died. However, having said that, I think that there's this same thing as was in the early church, that you had side by side real acts of God and counterfeits. And I really worry about media manipulators, you know, crying on handkerchiefs and asking people to send in a lot of money to bless them. That betrays the dignity and majesty of God and the Holy Spirit. So you have all these converts, and you have this conversion, and if you're as brilliant as the devil is, you're going to do a direct forked attack on the believers of Christ. And one of the ways you can do it is through signs and wonders, because the devil's been in the signs and wonders game since time immemorial, and people are simple-minded. And so if I can produce for you a glowing, shiny marble, or in this case a blessed handkerchief, or speaking a language you might know, it may be or it may not be legitimate. And I think people are getting deceived. And the only gradient we have for analyzing anything is the Scripture of God. It's like a chemist in a lab. He puts it through the supreme filter. If it gets through, it's okay. But if it's a new revelation or a more advanced revelation, or if it's contradictory to the Scripture, have nothing to do with it at all.
Growing up in India, I saw firsthand how the Hindu belief system greatly contributed to the poverty and suffering of India. I remember seeing the very poor giving their last bowl of rice to a sacred cow. I remember seeing the more well-to-do offering large amounts of food to wooden idols while children starved to death just a few feet away. All the while, gurus were living in their palatial mansions, compelling their followers into turning over their possessions to them.
According to the Guru Gita, one of Hinduism's most important scriptures, the follower must not only adore and worship the Guru as God, but surrender himself and all his possessions as well.
Most of the gurus that I know of in the West are super rich. Gurus are more interested in white disciples than in Indian disciples, largely because they get more money from the whites.
Rob, former transcendental meditator for 13 years, was a TM governor and in charge of teacher training at Maharishi International University.
The TM movement is very wealthy. They have land holdings all over the world. They have beautiful hotels in Switzerland. They have university campuses in the Midwest. They have academies on the East Coast, the West Coast.
Here he was getting served on silver plates 6 times a day, sleeping on a very soft bed, riding around in a Mercedes. But supposedly he was so renounced that he wasn't attached to these things, so that gave him a right to enjoy them.
Maharishi made a statement that says, when the money comes to me, he says it's transcendental.
Money is our last priority. Everything else is our first priority.
Hundreds of gurus have grown incredibly rich in the West through tax-exempt donations, and the manufacture and distribution of every kind of memorabilia honoring these self-proclaimed godmen. They have acquired vast land holdings, armed bodyguards, and outrageous luxuries, from posh hotels to their own fleets of planes, helicopters, and, as in Rajneesh's case, Rolls-Royces.
Why not Rolls-Royces? Why have anything less? This country is a capitalist country, and anything that produces or helps capitalism, why not? Anybody who says, why have Rolls-Royce? I say, you're a communist.
The guru's hypocrisy is diabolical, criticizing the materialism and commercialism in the West and convincing their followers that non-materialism will get them up the spiritual ladder. These gods of the New Age are laughing all the way to the bank. I know of groups involved in drug trafficking, smuggling, prostitution, and the buying and selling of weapons, all done to earn money for the guru.
I know of a variety of female disciples who were prostitutes in Bombay and making money with it.
I have evidence that the Rajneesh organization is making a lot of their income through illegal trafficking of drugs into this country.
If you have your head in a right place, you can create money. It is an art.
They were encouraged to smuggle dope from India to Europe, and from this money they could pay their workshops.
If they have to tell you they're with the Christian Children's Fund, or they're with the Salvation Army, or they're using the money to find men missing in action in Vietnam. Whatever they have to do to get the money, they'll do that because they believe what their guru told them, that the end justifies the means.
Hinduism teaches you to die to the voice of conscience inside that says, it's wrong. It teaches that there is no sin. This can be seen in the way that gurus and their disciples justify murder, violence, robbery, bribery, and crooked business transactions, all done in the name of heavenly deception.
People were encouraged not only to spy on each other when they were not properly surrendering to the master, people were encouraged to lie to each other. The mail is censored. We know of bribery with local politicians. People undergo, as I did, a change in their value system and become confused about what is right and what is wrong.
Another danger that you can see in a lot of the Eastern thinking is the sort of syncretism and the failure to make distinctions so that you transcend not just right and wrong, but this and that. And I think it's very important to say there are distinctions, not just between right and wrong, but in all sorts of things, to think critically, to think clearly.
The whole philosophy of Hinduism is very relative. There are no absolute moral standards upon which to act. Your feeling of right or wrong would change according to your level of consciousness.
You can become so completely under the power of this particular person that you refuse to think, or if you like, you're unable to think. You can lose the power to take decisions of any sort, no matter how trifling, in any area of your life.
Sally Belfridge, former resident of Rajneesh's religious community in India, wrote of her disillusionment in her book, Flowers of Emptiness.
I felt more and more kind of drawn into this emptiness of his. It's impossible to describe. It's more than charisma. Charisma doesn't do it justice at all. It's more than an aura. I really believed that he knew something I didn't, that he was on a plane that I was not.
They ask you for total and also brainless obedience and worship because they are God and they are more than human, and you have to follow these gods. You are not asked to deal with your brain and to ask questions.
I discover with amazement and dismay the readiness of people to submit.
So many people in the world feel that they've got to fling themselves headlong and believe and give up their autonomy.
People love to give up this heavy freedom that we have to carry with all the decisions and the effort it implies.
Freedom in the East is freedom from individuality. So it's a detached freedom that has no high place of man. And a lot of the Eastern way of thinking is like a sort of mist that falls in, or it's been described as an embrace that smothers any differences.
I found that I lost my identity somehow. He had no identity. He was a sort of conduit to the infinite. And I was somehow at the receiving end of something very strange and extraordinary.
There is something within man that drives him to worship. It's sort of like Bob Dylan said, you've got to serve somebody. And if you do not serve God, you must then have a substitute. And this is exactly what is being offered to man today. Substitutes for the true God. And because man is driven to worship, he is drawn many times to these substitutes. Unfortunately, in the church today, there are many churches that do deny the power of God. And people are looking for reality and power. And thus they are drawn to these Eastern mystical experiences where there is that promise of power. Paul speaks of men who, because they did not receive the truth of God, God brought to them a strong delusion that they would believe a lie rather than the truth. It's amazing to me what people will believe when they've rejected the truth of God. And surely we have observed today absurd beliefs of men, believing that man is God or can become God, and the denying of the reality of God. But in the final analysis, the worship of God, the true and the living God, will bring a man into a glorious liberty where the worship of these false gods will only bring you into bondage. Within all of us, there is a God-shaped vacuum. Throughout the ages, man has attempted to fill that void with the things of the world. But it is only through a relationship with our Creator that we can be truly satisfied. His Holy Scriptures reveal the way in which we can be reconciled to God, and that is through the provisions of His Son, Jesus Christ. I'm Chuck Smith.
And I'm Carol Matriciana. Join us again for another edition of The Pagan Invasion.